And so we looked at last week two connection points that connect us to Noah's day, two similarities that we see between our day and Noah's day. We saw, number one, population explosion. You remember that? Number two, we saw bizarre, perverse sexual immorality. And we had no trouble relating that into our present society. So far, we feel like, yeah, what Noah has experienced, what Noah's world looked like, that's what our world looks like today. And tonight, we're going to lead off with connection point number 3 here, that third similarity between us and Noah's day. So let's begin reading at verse 5, and I have about 5 to 10 minutes to get down to about verse 14 or 15. I don't know how that's going to happen, but we got to do it because I want us to spend the majority of our time tonight taking a look at the ark and the specs there and running the numbers and seeing just how feasible this ark was. So let's read at verse 5. I'll work my way down through this rather quickly, and it's going to be tough because there are going to be some things I want to stop and talk about, but let's see what we can do here. Verse 5, then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that's not a good great. That's a really horrible great that the Lord is talking about there. Reading on, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So let's just pick this up right here, right away. Connection point number 3 between Noah's day and our day is pervasive, consuming, evil thoughts in the minds of the general population. Do we have trouble relating to Noah's day on this one? So far, 3 for 3. We're tracking right along. I regret to say that I believe that as the Lord scanned the day of Noah and made this assessment, this general sweeping assessment of what God found on the earth, I regret to say that I do believe that the Lord would make that same assessment as he scans our world today and looks at the hearts. Because it's not just our actions. You know, we talk about that from time to time. It's not just our actions that God is concerned about. That's great if we can get our actions under control. But God is also capable of reading the mind. You know, anything that happens in the thought life, that's a spiritual plane. You know, that's where God is most often sensed and working, is in that spiritual plane of the thought life. By the way, the enemy as well. But so if God were to scan this world right now that we live in, I believe he would make the same general assessment. I believe he would say, the thoughts of mankind are just constant perverseness, just constant evil. And I know there are a lot of Christians, there are a lot of us on the earth, but, you know, you do have to understand that in comparison with the whole of population, we are a very great minority. And I believe that general statement would be just as it was in Noah's day. Man, try to find a thought out there that's pure. Give us some neutral thoughts, but you know the way that the world thinks, it's just constant filth. It takes us right back to my soapbox issue. You know, I got up on that soapbox a little bit last Wednesday. Well, here we are again because, you know, how do you get from a neutral or good spiritual condition, and how do you get to the point where the entire society or a nation or a world has just fallen to such corruption? And the answer is 2 words: ungodly influence. That's it. It's ungodly influence. And that ungodly influence needs a venue, and it gets a venue. We have media and entertainment. This is my soapbox issue. That's what I'm talking about. And it's tough for me not to get back on there because we are so horribly influenced by the entertainment and media industry. And I don't think we could even calculate the damage that has done to our society. I am a firm believer. This might sound, you know, like alarmism and the sky is falling like Noah kind of thing. But I am a firm believer that it is absolutely possible that America could fall to ungodly influence that was brought on through entertainment and media. You know, if you go back 80 years, about 80 years to 1940, there was a movie called Gone with the Wind that came out. And in that movie, actor Clark Gable made this statement, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a hoot and don't pollute." Well, that's not what he said, but you know what he said. When he said that statement and it aired on the television, there was like an outcry in this country. This nation just exploded that someone would use the D word, that someone would say damn on the air and that they would actually air it. There was an explosion and an outcry over that. Look where we are now. You know, look at the shows we used to have. Leave It to Beaver and The Andy Griffith Show and, you know, all those other shows that I was way too young to have seen. But all of those shows and now look what we have. You can't even watch commercials without hearing some kind of filth or hearing the innuendo or seeing some kind of sexual perversion simulated or insinuated. You know what I'm talking about? That's not even getting to the media. That's not even getting to the movies, the TV shows, the stuff on the internet. It's everywhere we turn. You can't even read your Facebook wall without reading the filth. We're in a bad place. And I know most people, when they hear this kind of stuff, when they hear someone saying this kind of stuff, you know, they wonder what age I was born in, like the Victorian age or what, that I would be worried about these things. But I'm telling you, that has affected our society. You know it. You see it. The minds of people are constantly on this filth because it's constantly pushed to us. How did that happen? Gradually over many, many long years. We started with a curse word, 1940. From there, more curse words. From there, you know, the sexual innuendo started, the perversity, it's no big deal if you have that affair. And the minds of people began to change. That's how it happens. We slowly accept things because media slowly just keeps chipping away at it and saying, this is normal, this is okay. And before long, you got people saying, yeah, I'm going to talk like that. I'm going to use those words. I'm a tough guy. And yeah, I'm going to go out and have some affairs. I mean, it's fun. And it's okay on TV. And the culture changes and we get to a bad place. Basically, if you look at our world today and you take the 10 Commandments, two things, the 10 Commandments and the fruit of the Spirit, and you compare it to the thoughts, the imaginations of the heart of the people in this nation, and you compare those two things, basically what you come to realize is that everything in the 10 Commandments and the things that we see in the fruit of the Spirit are complete opposite to this world. Let's just real quickly take the fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5, 22 and 23. You all know this. It says, but the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. All right, now if you flip this, if you take and just use the exact opposite of these words on purpose, let's do this and see if it sounds like the world we live in, okay? All right, so first of all, the fruit of the, not spirit, but flesh. The fruit of the flesh is not love, but hate. Not joy, but depression. Not peace, but hostility. Not long-suffering, but impatience. Not kindness, but rudeness. Not goodness, but wickedness. Not faithfulness, but unfaithfulness. Not gentleness, but stubbornness. And not self-control, but lack of self-control. Does that sound like what we live in? Does that sound like what you guys see in traffic every day on the highways? Is that what you read on the Facebook comments as two sides clash and argue over their opinions? That's what I see. It tells me that our world is in a really bad place and that influence has damaged us. It has brought us to a place where I am truly fearful that we can't come back from. I mean, we can't seem to get the Christian influence to take root. The other influence has just dug itself in how they say it, like an Alabama tick, It has dug in, and we have got our work cut out for us. Noah in his day was the only one. He was the shining example of someone whose thoughts, whose mind wasn't just constant filth. And if you're in that place today where you somehow in this filthy world can keep your mind clean, you're one of the rare exceptions. I hope that's everyone in this place tonight. Verse 6, and the Lord was sorry. I got to get off this soapbox. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth. And he was grieved in his heart. Verse 7, so the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping things and birds of the air, for I am sorry that I have made them. I mean, if that doesn't get you in the heart, I don't know what will. To think that mankind had this kind of influence over God, that we could impact God in this way. I say we, as in all of mankind, that through this fall, through this corruption, you see the heart of God sorrowful and grieving. But those are good words in the chapter, because those words wouldn't be there if the Lord didn't have love for us. Those words, sorry and grieving, they show very powerfully, they attest to God's love for His creation, that even though His creation had fallen this far, that He still loved them. In Ezekiel, we're told that the Lord does not delight in the death of the wicked. He only says, turn to me, for why should you die? That's God's heart. He does not delight in the destruction of the wicked. Here He is, overviewing a fallen, corrupt, horrendous world, and yet God is moved in His emotions because of His love for those people. I am just not like God in the area of compassion. I am not. If I were God, I would not be having a problem right here. I would be A-okay with the destruction of the wicked, because I know what that wickedness does to any society. And I want to see that ungodly influence completely gone. If it were up to me, we would all serve the Lord. I don't have the same kind of compassion that God does, but God looks on that fallen creation and He's moved with compassion. He's not chomping at the bit saying, same with our day. God is not chomping at the bit saying, I just can't wait to unleash Revelation 6 through 19. This is going to be so amazing to see the wicked scatter. I can't wait. That's not God's heart. God is conflicted by His love for people. He is conflicted and sorrowful in His heart. So that's a good sign that we read that. Verse 8, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Verse 9, this is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. So Noah found grace. We know what that means. What does the word grace mean? Unmerited, undeserved, unearned favor. If Noah found grace in God's eyes, what does that mean? Unearned favor. It means he didn't deserve it. Now, I know we just read of how incredible this man is. But notice the comparison there. He was perfect in his generation. Noah was not perfect. I don't want any of us to think he was sinlessly perfect. He wasn't. He had to find grace in God's eyes just like we do. He had a clean lifestyle. His lifestyle was that of justness, fairness, rightness. He was perfect in his generations. He was the perfect example. What made him perfect was that he walked with God. That's what makes us perfect. You stay in that relationship with the Lord where you're walking with the Lord, and though you're not practically perfect, you can remain in that positionally perfect condition, because as we say very well established in this church, when we sin, we confess. When we mess up, when we fail, we confess. That's walking with God. And so Noah had this as his testimony. He was the primo example of what a man or woman could achieve with the Lord back then, and still to this day, even in the midst of a very perverse society. You know, if people could be perfect, number one, I'd be first in line for that. I pray a lot for my own righteousness, my own holiness, my own lifestyle to be clean. And if I could be perfect, I would be in that line first, probably before anyone. But if it were possible for mankind to be perfect, let's just use a little reason. If it were possible, Jesus never would have had to come and die on the cross. I mean, if we could achieve it, if we could attain it, there would be no excuses regardless of how hard it was. If you could reach sinless perfection, Jesus would not have come to die. But the problem is, you start out in life as sinfully flawed and not sinlessly perfect. And you don't go from sinfully flawed and fallen and cursed to perfect before God. So he had to come and die. What did Jesus pray in the Garden of Gethsemane? He prayed, Lord, Father, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, right? Why did he pray that? Why was he praying, Lord, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me? Lord, if there's any other way for mankind to be saved, if there's any other way to do this, then let's do it that way. He prayed that way so that we could read it and we could understand that between the Father and the Son there in the prayer of Gethsemane, it was determined that there was no other way for us to be perfect except that he would die on the cross, shed the blood, that we might be forgiven, that we might be set free from our sins and positionally be found perfect in him as we walk with God. So, Noah, perfect example in his day. Verse 10, Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and cheese sandwich. I'm going to get one of these to hit. One of these is going to hit. He begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Verse 11, the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. Connection point number 4 between Noah's day and our day. The earth was filled with violence. Do we have any issue relating our current society with that? Are we a violent society or not? I don't think I have to get back up on my soapbox, do I? I'm trying to stay off that thing. We are a violent society. And I'm just going to move on. But let me just say this. It is said that on TV, our kids, by the time they reach 18 years old, they have seen over 200,000 violent crimes on TV. We're not even dealing with the internet and the phones, YouTube. We're not even dealing, this is just the TV set. Over 200,000 violent crimes they witness before they're 18. And then when a child goes into a school and shoots the school up, we scratch our heads and say, what's going on here? How's this possible? And what's the first thing we always hear after a mass shooting or a school shooting? We find out what that person was into. And most often it's, well, he loved these violent video games, or he loved these violent movies. You see the influences. There's proof there, but our media wants to disconnect us from that so we don't make the connection. And they will tell us, they will get up on their pedestals and they'll tell us, well, what you see on TV, and this is what has been said, what you see on TV does not influence the culture. It only reflects the culture. No, TV doesn't inspire these things. We're only reflecting what the culture has already come into. But media, no, it has no influence over people. But those same companies, when it comes time for the Super Bowl, they will line up, they will jump at the chance to spend millions of dollars for a 30-second ad during the Super Bowl. Why? Well, they're showing you their cards. They know the influence that media has over us. All right. I got to move on. You get the point. Verse 12. Whew. So God looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Verse 14, make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark, and cover it inside and outside with pitch, with tar. A couple quick notes here. First, we do not know what gopher wood is. If anyone tries to tell you they know what gopher wood is, don't go for it. I did not intend that. That slipped out. I really did not intend that. It's better when I don't try, I think. We don't know what gopher wood is. You'll hear some people say, well, we think it's a cypress, or we think it's that. No, we have no clue because we don't know what this word is. We don't even know if it's a Hebrew word. We can't make sense of it. It doesn't appear anywhere else in the scriptures, only here, and we have nothing to connect it to. We don't have any historical sources to tell us what gopher wood is. We don't have any traditions passed down over the generations to tell us what gopher wood is. We just don't know. But here's what we should be able to figure out. Noah is going to be building a gigantic ark. So I'm thinking that gopher wood was not something soft like poplar. If you'd have tried to make this ark out of poplar, yeah, that would have been easy to work with, but it would have never lasted to the flood, and it certainly wouldn't have held up under the flood. He obviously was using a strong wood. We don't know if it's something that's not around anymore or something that's still here. But listen, we have some very strong wood trees in this world. There are trees that are twice as strong as the European and the American white oak. Twice as strong. Now, I don't know if you know how strong oak is, but I'm telling you, if you've ever tried to work with oak, it is crazy strong wood. But they tell us that there are trees where the wood is so strong it comes just shy of the strength of steel. So there is some strong trees, some strong wood, some strong material that Noah could have used here. It obviously would have had to be very durable and very strong, which meant what? His job to put this ark together was not an easy one. I mean, if you think God always calls you to easy tasks, you might want to take a look at this passage. God does not always call us to easy tasks. And sometimes the tasks He gives us seems overwhelming. I am sure that the work for Noah was extremely tough, but God did give him many, many years to get it done. And here's all I know, that when God does give us tough assignments, His help is very strong in our life, and He gives us the time, He gives us the help, He gives us the direction, He gives us the abilities, everything that we need to complete the job. So the next time that you are bending under the weight of ministry work, think back to Noah, and then realize, all right, if Noah can do that, I can get those reports done, secretary. I can get those teaching notes done, Sunday school teachers. I can get that sign hung down there. If Noah can do what he did, the Lord can help me to tackle all of the ministry projects or assignments or callings that He's placed in my life. I want to talk about the Hebrew word kafar. That's the word for pitch there. But I don't have time. I'll just throw this out there. That word is used many, many times in the Old Testament, and this is the only time that it is not translated as the word atonement. That is the word atonement in every other appearance, but here it is translated as kafar, and pitch. It's translated as pitch, pardon me. It's just an interesting connection, because what does the word atonement mean? It means, if you just break up the word, you have the meaning. Atonement means at one-ment, to be made one with the Lord, and you have that pitch. You're putting it over the cracks in the boards. You're filling it in. It's sealing it. It's making it all one. And I could go on there, but I'm out of time. So, verse 15. And this is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. All right? First, you need to eradicate from your mind the usual depictions of the ark. You normally see a boat that is shaped like a ship. It's got the fancy hull all carved out into a point, looks like a ship. The Ark Encounter in Kentucky, for example, they give you that nice boat look to the ark. But we're reading right here what the Lord measured out for Noah to build. He measured out for Noah just to build a big barge. This was just a big box. And its purpose was not to navigate water, so he didn't need to carve out the hull or, add the rudder. No, this was not going to navigate waters. All it had to do was float. Just picture a giant coffin on top of the ocean, on top of the water. That's what Noah was tasked to build. Now, I don't blame the Ark Encounter. I don't blame Answers in Genesis and Ken Ham for making the Ark look like a boat. I would have done that too. You don't build a big box out in the middle of the Kentucky plains and then expect people to come and see it. You got to at least make it look like a ship. I would have done the same thing. But no, we're dealing with a giant barge here. And let's take a look at its dimensions. It is 6 times longer than it is wide. Does that mean anything to anyone? Well, it's the 6-to-1 ratio. And I'll tell you why that's important. That is the primo ratio for shipbuilding. It is still the same ratio that is used today to build ships. You see a battleship, an American battleship out there floating on the ocean? Thank Noah. That's a 6-to-1 ratio, more than likely. How did he know that all the way back in Genesis 6? How did he know about the perfect seafaring 6-to-1 ratio for a ship? 6 times longer than it is wide. How did he know? I guess he just got lucky on his first prototype, right? No, he didn't get lucky. He had divine knowledge feeding him these plans. God was the architect. Didn't realize I couldn't say that word till just now. God was the architect and he was the builder. He was the construction crew. Probably had his kids out there working. I know if it was my dad, that's what it would have happened. Interesting, we never got credit for the projects we helped him with, but we always had to be there and do it. It's just part of life, but I'm not bitter about it. All right, so a cubit is 18 to 24 inches. That's a really ancient way of measuring. I don't know if they couldn't figure out how to make a tape measure, or a yardstick, but they measured from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger, the longest finger. That was a cubit. It was about 18 to 24 inches. Most people go by that 18 inches, and we're going to use that number, 18 inches, as a cubit to run our calculations tonight. Because what we're going to do is we are going to ridiculously pad these numbers. We're going to take the smallest measurements when we can, and when we're talking about the animals, we're going to use the biggest numbers that we can. We're going to blow these numbers up with all of this cushion just to see how feasible this is. And remember, this is not for us who believe. This is for the world. This is our way of saying, okay, we're going to look at the most ridiculous numbers tonight just to say, would you quit it already with the doubts about whether you could get all the animals on the ark? All right, so a cubit, 18 inches, using that number. I will tell you this, if you go on the site, Answers for Genesis by Ken Ham, he uses some larger numbers here. I'll reference those, but we're going to use these smaller numbers just to make this more difficult. All right, so if a cubit is 18 inches and we take these measurements that the Lord has given Noah, that makes the ark 450 feet long, conservatively, 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet in height. And we're going to find out it has 3 levels. So, bottom floor, middle floor, top floor, 3 levels. That gives us roughly a total of 97,000 square feet of space. 97,000 square feet of space. How big is that? Well, just to give you an idea, the White House. Have you ever seen the White House? The whole thing, not just the part that looks like a house, but all the parts that come out of it and extend and go back into all these other rooms. The White House is only 55,000 square feet, and yet it contains 132 rooms, 3 kitchens, 35 bathrooms, 28 fireplaces, 3 elevators, and all sorts of other stuff. All right, so that's a pipsqueak compared to the ark. The White House is 55,000 square feet. The ark is 97,000 square feet, just shy of 100,000 feet. All right, so let's do it this way. Do you know how big a boxcar is? You've seen a boxcar, right? Those are the things that are being pulled on the train tracks, down the train tracks, right? Those big boxcars that sit on top, those containers. Well, keep in mind they are bigger than they look when you take a peek in the inside. If you're looking at them going down the tracks, you can't tell how big they are. But when you step in them, you realize they're really big, okay? So we're going to use boxcars to compare with the amount of space that we would have on the ark. And if you do that, you would come up with the equivalency of not 100 boxcars of space, not 200, not 300, not 400, not 500, but 520 boxcars of space. That would be the equivalent amount of space on the ark, 97,000 square feet. So, the question, sounds like a lot of space, but there are a lot of animals. Is that really enough space for all the animals to fit? Well, for this answer, we have to look in two different places. We have to look at what the taxonomists say. Those are the biologists that study the species and the genders of, or not gender, the species and the genera of all these animals, and give them names and find out if they can intermate and all these things, right? Those are the people that study that. So we need that. We need the taxonomists. We need to know what they say. And we need good old mathematics. That's all that we need to do this. So if we use the chart from Answers in Genesis, can you throw that up real quick for me? If we use this chart, you'll realize we first have to plan our approach. All right, because this last category here, if you'll see at the bottom, this is counting every single known species. And they've done some of the work for us. They've taken out, some of the things that we don't really need to include, like this, insects, bugs. We don't really need to calculate that because they can just go in nooks and crannies. There's plenty of space for as many insects as needed to be on there. We're not even going to bother counting them. We're not going to count fish. Y'all get that, right? Y'all understand why we don't want the fish on the ark. They can swim, they're fine. All right, so we don't calculate those. But all of these other animals, we're going to calculate them. And if we go by all known species, that puts us at almost 1.4 million different species. And I will admit to you right off the bat, that is impossible. That's not gone on our ark. That's not gone on our 520 boxcars. But here's the thing. We don't need that number because that includes everything. That includes like the lion and the tiger and the liger and the house cat. It's including all of these different species, every breakdown that we have, and we don't need that. We realize that for the ark, we don't need all of the different species. We don't need the Doberman Pinscher and the Dachshund. Did I say that right? We definitely don't need Dachshunds. Trust me. All right, we don't need all those different species. And if we bump over to this middle category, which is the category that Answers in Genesis uses to run their numbers, you realize we really only need 2 dogs. We really only need 2 cats. And anything that can reproduce among those animal types, we're going to call that now not a species, but a family of animals. Or as we read in our Bibles, a kind, right? It's a kind. It's a family of animals. You can take a tiger and a lion, and you can mate them, and they'll produce a liger. That's how it works. So these things that can interbreed, we're going to consider them a family. And we don't need all of the diversity because we do know one thing about time. We know that over a long passing of time, there is a lot of micro change within different kinds of animals and species. There's a lot of micro change, not macro change. We talked about that in Genesis 1. But there's a lot of micro change. So if you just take, a couple dogs and a couple cats and, one of each family of animals, over thousands of years, those things can change and micro change and interbreed. And there's all these productions of all of these different varieties of animals. But this is a really small number. This is 938. I'm not even going to bother doing that math because, my goodness, that's not even scratching the surface of the space we have on the ark. So we're going to ignore that middle column, which is all that we need to prove that Noah could get all the animals on the ark that he needed. That's it, that middle column. But we're going to go to this first column here because it's the column of genera, which is this middle ground between a species, all of it, and a kind, a family of animals. It's the middle ground where now you're taking and you're saying, okay, what all can we get from these two cats? And what all can we get from these two reptiles? There's how many different types of frogs in the world. You don't have to go for all that, but you do need to find out what can interbreed, what can give us the production of all of these different animals that we see. And that's the first column. If you come down here to the bottom, you'll see that number is 7,877. Now, we immediately need to double that. We're going to take this big number that we don't need. This is giving us all kinds of extras, right? And we're taking this number and we're going to double it immediately because, well, we know there's 2 of every kind so far. So we're going to double this. We're going to go from 7,877, and we're just going to round it and make it 16,000. Let's just say 16,000 animals is what we need on the ark, just to make sure. Just to make sure we can produce everything after the flood. All right, but that's not good enough for me because it's still not worth running the numbers. It's still not scratching the surface. Even if we're doubling that number, 16,000 animals on the ark, piece of cake. You got to remember how many of these things are small. The majority of them are small. You got frogs, and you got little, very tiny creatures. You do have some big ones, but you don't have nearly the same amount of numbers of large mammals. So all of this balances itself out. That's a small number. We're going to double it. We're going to make this as challenging as we can. We're going to take 16,000. And we're going to double it, and we're going to now use the number 32,000. Let's just say we want to be extremely, extremely safe. So instead of using this column, which would give us all that we need, we're going to go to this column. We're going to take them by genera. We're going to double it for our 2. And now we're just going to, for fun and for cushion, we're going to double that number again. We're going to take twice as many animals on the ark as what we need. So we're going to use 32,000. Now, big question. Can you get 32,000 animals on this ark? Come back next week for the answer. No. No, but real quick time out here, because the next thing that we have to do is we have to find an average animal size if we're going to calculate this. An average animal size, and this is where we turn to the taxonomist. We tell the taxonomist, give us the numbers of every animal that we would need, add up all of the size of them, and then divide that number by the total number of animals that we're going to have on our ark. And when you do that, you come up with an average size animal of a full-grown sheep. Okay? So when we look at this, 32,000, our total number, we're going to be thinking of this in terms of 32,000 animals the size of a sheep. That gives us our balance. You got the large animals, you got the small animals, and this is how they balance out, taxonomists say. All right, so can you get 32,000 sheep or sheep-sized animals in the ark? Well, we know this, and you can research all of this. You can crunch all these numbers. We know that you can get 290 sheep in a boxcar, a multi-level boxcar. I see a head shaking back there. Someone actually knows this. So that's awesome. Thank you for the confirmation. You can get 290 sheep in a boxcar that has multiple levels to it, right? How many levels does our ark have? 3. All right, you can get 290 sheep in each boxcar. So if you crunch those numbers, for 32,000 sheep, you can get them all in 111 boxcars. How many boxcars of space do we have on the ark? 520. Remember, we didn't go with that number. We didn't go with that number. We doubled the whole thing. And we're still only, by calculation, filling 111 boxcars. Now, I know this is an imperfect science, but you're seeing how much cushion there is here because we still have 409 boxcars of space. We know Noah is going to bring 7 of the clean animals. We know he's going to be bringing food and supplies and all that stuff. But we've got 409 boxcars if we're using grossly inflated numbers. And you say, oh, I got you, Arlyn. Here's what you're not calculating for. The dinosaurs. That's what you're not doing. See, when you throw the dinosaurs into the mix, that's the problem. We know that dinosaurs were there before the flood because God created everything in Genesis 1. He created man right alongside of dinosaurs. That's a fact. And you can see that on cave drawings. Even though science tells you they lived billions and gazillions of years before mankind, no, that's on cavemen drawings. We know that mankind lived together. Genesis 1, we were all created together. We get after the flood and we read the book of Job and we realize Job lived simultaneously with dinosaurs. So we know they survived the flood, which means the dinosaurs have to be on the ark. And that's a lot of space, right? Well, only if you're bringing a full-size T-Rex, you know that's not going to happen. I have seen all the Jurassic Park movies. I know how that ends. No, you do not bring a full-size T-Rex. You do not bring a full-size Brontosaurus or Brachiosaurus. You bring young dinosaurs. Wow. I just blew the minds of the skeptical world. All of these animals, the elephants. You think you're getting a full-size elephant on there? I don't think I'm bringing a full-size elephant. If I'm God, I think I'm sending small animals. It's just me. So, yeah, we're calculating the dinosaurs. We're calculating all of it. We have so much space on the ark. You saw it. You saw it. Verse 16. Can't guarantee it smelled good on there, but I can guarantee you there was a lot of space. Verse 16, you shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it to a cubit from above, and set the door of the ark in its side. You shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. Now, it does appear if you read this story that Noah had control of the window, but God had control of the door. And I like that because I see a good spiritual application in it. When we look to the New Testament, how many ways is there to be saved? How many ways is there to the Father? How many doors into the sheepfold? There's just the one. Jesus said, I am the door. In Revelation, Jesus said, I open it and no man can shut it. That's the Lord. He is the door. And He lets us in. We come to the door. He opens the door. Man can't shut it on us. Man can't slam it in our faces. And you can't slam it in other people's faces that want to be saved either. He opens that door of salvation to you. You come in. He shuts the door. And He keeps you in there safely. You're seeing this word picture emerge from the story of Noah's Ark that really symbolizes our salvation. We could talk about the kafir, the pitch, the atonement that's used. We could talk about the door, the one way in that Noah had no control over. God shut the door when it was time to shut the door, and Noah couldn't get the door open. Certainly not after it was underwater. But Noah did have control of the window. He could open up the window and let illumination in. The sunshine. Sunshine, very important. Vitamin D. Good for mood. If you're in a bad mood and it's sunny out, get outside. What are you doing? Vitamin D, the sunshine. So Noah had that control to open up and let the illumination in, just as you and I, we can let the illumination of the Word into our hearts at any time that we want. He could open that window to let in the oxygen, the air. And we can always open that channel, that window between us and the Lord, and let the air of the Holy Spirit fill us. So I see these connections, and I love that story. I love how that connects. Verse 17. And behold, I myself am bringing floodwaters on the earth to destroy from under heaven all flesh, in which is the breath of life. Everything that is on the earth shall die. Verse 18. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. 8 more people that we have to calculate into this. I think we're still okay on space, though. I think we'll skip that. I think we're okay. Verse 19. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female, verse 20, of the birds of their kind, of animals after their kind, and of every creeping thing of the earth after its kind, 2 of every kind. Middle column on that, right? 2 of every kind, 2 of every family type will come to you to keep them alive. Verse 21, and you shall take for yourself of all food that is eaten, and you shall gather it to yourself, and it shall be food for you and for them. Now, I'm almost done here. Hang in there for just a few minutes. Right at verse 19, if I was Noah, I would be extremely nervous. Because when you read verse 19, the Lord told Noah, Noah, bring 2 of every sort into the ark. And right there, panic would strike my heart, because if I'm Noah, I'm thinking, all right, I've got to go out and I've got to beat the bushes, and I've got to find all these animals. I've got to grab them by the nape of the neck, and I've got to bring them all in 2 at a time. And you panic. Lord, that would be a monumental task, probably more so than building the ark and preaching to a lost generation. You know, bringing animals that aren't prepared for this and aren't cooperating. I can't even get my cat into the room that I need it to be in, you know. And he's got to go out and do that all, but the joy that must have filled him when the Lord keeps talking and says in verse 20, 2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive. You see what's happening here. Noah, he tells Noah, bring them 2 by 2 into the ark. But then he says, 2 of every kind are going to come to you so that you can keep them alive. You see what God's doing, don't you? God is bringing the animals up to the door. He's bringing the animals, and all Noah has to do is stand there, check them in, and show them to the rooms, right? He built rooms in the ark. So he's like a doorman. That's all he's got to do. Welcome them, get them into their proper place. But God brought them to the door. And I know maybe it seems like a silly point to emphasize, but we get it a lot out there in the world. They say, how foolish must you be to believe that Noah went out and collected animals 2 by 2? No, he didn't. He didn't need to do that. God was working with Noah. God was doing his part too, as God always does when we're working for him. God was working on the other end. God rewired those animals, and suddenly their instincts bring them, the right ones that were to come, their instincts bring them to the door, and Noah takes them into the ark. I wish I had time to go off into a study about the instincts of animals. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Migratory patterns. All of these complex and inexplicable things that animals do, and all the world can say is, well, it's instincts. Well, yeah, but what is instincts? I say it's not instincts. I say let's not throw a word at it. I say let's give credit where credit is due. God has programmed his creation, and those migratory patterns and all of the complexities that the animal life does in this world, all programmed by God. How easy it would be for God to just program 2 at a time to come up to the door, to come to the ark to be saved. How easy would that be? Again, it comes back to Genesis 1:1. If you can believe Genesis 1:1, if you can believe in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. If you can believe Genesis 1:1, you can get to Genesis 6 and you can go, no problem, no sweat. I believe it. I see it. All right, so how did the snail get to the ark? They once asked that to Charles Haddon Spurgeon. How did the snail get on the ark? His response? Patience. Patience. He had to wait longer on some of them than the others. Verse 22. So, we know God did his part. God was lining this up to bring the animals. Did Noah do his part? Verse 22. Thus Noah did, according to all that God commanded him. So he did. And that is why we handle this as a historical event. It'd be really easy for us to make all of these tricky stories in the Old Testament allegories. You know, we could say, well, the serpent wasn't really a serpent. It represented, temptation. And the fruit, well, that wasn't really a fruit from an actual tree. It's all allegories and symbols. And Noah's Ark, no, of course that didn't really happen. That's a kid's story. It's just all allegorical for a story about things were bad, and the Lord judged it, and only 8 survived it. We could make all of these things allegories to try to make it more palatable to the world. But why don't we do that? Because when we come to the New Testament, Jesus himself would look back on these stories, and he wouldn't look back on them as allegories. He would look back on them as historical facts of things that happened. He would speak about Adam and Eve as real people. He would speak about creation as an actual event. He would speak about Noah's Ark as an actual historical thing that happened. Now, really then the big question is not, do you believe the ark could have happened? Really the big question is, who do you think Jesus is? Because if he is Lord, if it is true what is said of Jesus in the New Testament, that by him all things were made, without him was not anything made that was made. If that's true, that means that Jesus was there when this whole ark thing was going down, and Jesus called it true. Now, that makes it real easy for me. I believe Genesis 1:1. I know who Jesus is. I believe Jesus over the skeptics of the world. We've run the numbers. This is a true story. This really happened. God really saved in this way.